You're good to go.
Okay, hello all. It is 7 p.m. This meeting has already been called to order prior to an executive session, so we can go right on in. Everyone wants to take themselves off of mute and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United
United
States
States of America,
and to the republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice is for all.
Thank you all. Tonight, we get to start with a really heartwarming and great piece of the whole Board of Education experience, although it's sad and bittersweet. We're recognizing the service of 3 board members who are leaving the board at this time. So we'll start off with Nora Gatos. Nora has been with us. She's been sworn in as a member of the Board of Education in February of 2020 to fill a board vacancy. And for the remainder of the 2019-20 school year, as well as the 2021 school year, and this far in the 2021 to 22 school year, she has served both on the policy committees and the curriculum committee. Unfortunately, her term actually officially expired on the 2nd of November, as she was an appointed position, but she is here to receive this recognition. And Dr. Silva, if you have something to say as well.
Yes, so thank you, Jonathan. Nora, it has been an absolute pleasure. You come to this board with the heart of a teacher, which makes it a lot easier for us teachers when we have folks like that on board, literally and figuratively. And you've balanced well being a board member, a mom with your son last year, a teacher, certainly, and a community member. And we thank you. Your eagle eye has been invaluable. And I know that Cheryl has appreciated that for sure. So again, we thank you. And we'd like to honor you with one of your favorite books, Finding Muchness, if you can see this, How to Add More Life to Life. And you'll notice, if you can see through my Zoom, there is a label that honors you, Nora, for your service as a Board of Education member. And so this will be donated to our school libraries. And again, thank you, Nora.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Also leaving us, but not until next week, Kathleen Holtz. You've been on the board since November of 2017 for a full 4-year term. In 2017, 2018, you served on the policy committee, the strategic planning committee, and you were the project resilience rep for the board. 2018-19, you were the board secretary, as well as being on the policy committee and strategic planning committee and the outreach committee. 2019 to 20, you served on the curriculum committee, as well as the strategic planning committee again, as well as being the PTA council liaison. Last year, you were the chair of the curriculum committee, and you were also on the strategic planning and PTA liaison again. And this year, again, you've been chairing the curriculum committee, which is really going to be tough shoes to fill. We are going to miss you. I know that the administration is really sad to see you leave. And if there was a way for you to be on the curriculum committee without being on the board, we would find it, but we have not yet been able to find a way to do that. Thank you so much for your service.
Thank you. So Kathleen, you selected the book New Kid, and this book will be placed in our middle school in your honor as well. And this book is written by Jerry Kraft and an enjoyable book. But again, we'd like to thank you for your hard work. You actually come to us with many different lenses, one including an administrator. So as an administrator, a teacher, a mommy, a Board of Education member, a community member, we can't thank you enough for your service. Your perspective has truly been invaluable. I know my friends on the curriculum committee are shedding a tear with losing you, because you really have added so much to our work, quite frankly, and asking the very difficult questions that you need us to think about. So strategic planning as well, but certainly I know your heart is in curriculum, and we felt it every single time that you are at those meetings and the joy that comes from being a teacher. So again, on behalf of all of us, thank you. And we will place this book at SERMS in your honor. Thanks, Kathleen.
Can I just say something about why I chose that book?
Yes.
I'm not
Please.
a fan of graphic novels for middle schoolers, but I wanted to choose a book that was not only meaningful to me in some way, but also would become dog-eared, smudged, lost, loved, and talked about by the children. And so, and spark conversations that are really meaningful to the children in our community. And first of all, Jerry Kraft is a friend of mine. His son and my daughter went to school for 11 years together, and she and he are still friends after college. So there's that's the personal connection. But New Kid is a Newbery winner. But I think most importantly, it's such an important book because it talks about fitting in. Now it's semi-autobiographical for Jerry. And it's about an African-American kid going to a school with lack of diversity, a private school, and talking about it, but it's humorous, it's poignant. And I just hope that this book will be there for children to learn, to talk about, and have conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that's why I chose it for various reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Kathleen. And last but not least, Margaret. Margaret Smatis has been on the board since December 2016 when she came on to fill a vacancy. For her first year, she served on the Budget and Finance Committee and the Strategic Planning Committee and served as Provincial Council rep. 2017-18, she was the secretary to the board. She was the chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. She served on the Negotiations Committee and was the RHS Athletic Advisory Committee rep as well. The last 2 years, 2018-19 and 2019-20, she served as chair of the Board of Education, as well as serving on the Policy Committee, Negotiation Committee, the CABE Liaison, and the CES Liaison. This past year, 2020-2021, she was on the Strategic Planning Committee. She chaired the Policy Committee and was again the CES Liaison. And this year so far, she's been the chair of the Policy Committee. She was also recognized last year by CABE when she achieved her CABE Board Member Academy certification, accomplishing 20 credits. Now, a credit is a 3-hour training. So over her term here, she spent at least 60 hours doing workshops with CABE. It's a lot of work. You're going to be hard to replace with CABE. CES has already reached out asking how we're going to be able to fill your shoes there. You've taught me all I know, but unfortunately we haven't had enough time for you to teach me everything you know. We're really going to miss you.
So Margaret, same here for all of us. You have truly been such a mentor, formally and informally, to many of us, an amazing thought partner. Certainly I can say for myself as a new superintendent, I don't know how I would have transitioned in a COVID world without you. So a huge, huge thanks. You were truly a role model for Board of Education members, and certainly just a partner, a collaborator, and very open to lots of different perspectives. And while you don't come from the teacher role, you come from a completely different role that has added so much benefit, in particular to the policy committee, I must say, that we're trying to squeeze the life out of you with one more meeting. But the amount of work, and for all of our board members that are on this video tonight, you realize how much work it is for all of you, and the amount of labor, studying, preparing as you lead these committees is immense. And we truly, on the part of the administration, could not be able to do this without you. And so on behalf of all of us, we're so incredibly thankful for your partnership, your collaboration, and your membership. And you selected the book Wolfpack, which I think feels fitting right now, by Abby Wambach, a U.S. soccer Olympic gold medalist. And the book is about how young people will find their voice, unite their pack, and change the world. And so an incredibly fitting book, Margaret. And again, thank you, to Nora, and to Kathleen. Truly, you have been amazing Board of Education members, and the past year and a half is a tribute to all of the hard work that our board members do, and in particular for you three that are leaving us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you too to all of you. It seems so weird to be doing this virtually, but thank you to all the board members and to the administration, to all those people who are behind the scenes who help out every day, like Cheryl Cook and Nancy Gurna, Pat Roche, Christine Melograno, and Cynthia Bellata. We've all been through a lot over the last 5 years, but especially the last 18 months. And I just want to say thank you to all of you. But I know, I'm kind of leaving confident that we're taking the district in the right direction. Over the past 20 years that I've been involved with coming to Board of Ed meetings, I can honestly say that this administration is the best yet. And when you add on top of that, the amazing teachers and staff that we have and all the people that run our schools, I'm really optimistic, for the future, even if I won't be at the table on Monday nights. One last thing is, I just hope that for the new board members and the new board as a whole, to just remember your purpose. Sometimes it can get ugly, especially during campaign season, and I ask you to put that to the side, start with a fresh slate. You don't have to agree and you don't even have to like each other, but for the sake of our students and our staff and our taxpayers, you need to respect each other's views and perspectives, to listen and observe, and to act with civility. You can role model that civil discourse for our kids. And keep those students first in all of your decision making. Remember that we're here for them. So good luck and keep up the good work. I'll be watching on Monday nights.
Thank you, Margaret. This is rough. Okay, moving on. My report for tonight, first of all, we are down to a board of 7. The way logistics works, the 2 appointed members of the board, that would be both Tina and Nora. Their terms expired on November 2nd, the day after our last meeting. So there are currently only 7 members on the board, but there are more coming very soon. And to that point, I want to congratulate a few people. I want to congratulate Tina Malhotra, Amy Casey, Selena Bell, Tom Collin, Stavros Natsopoulos, Meg Oyembazar, and Julia London. You all put yourselves out there. You all fought for what you believed in, and you all did what you thought would be best for the students in this town. You all should be congratulated for that courage. And I do look forward to working with some of you in the future, and hopefully with others of you in other venues in the future as well. Coming up next, we do have a tri-board meeting next Tuesday, the 16th. The newly elected members of the Board of Education will be sworn in by that time, so they will be partaking in that meeting as well. And then after that, 2 weeks from now, November 22nd's meeting will be our organizational meeting of the board. That'll be the night that we are choosing a new chair, a new vice chair, and a new secretary. That's all I've got for tonight. Dr. De Silva.
Thank you, Jonathan. I saw Rachel have her hand up. I don't know. Rachel, did you need to say something? Sorry, Jonathan. She's on another screen.
Sorry, I missed it.
It's okay. I'm sorry, Jonathan. Is it okay to say something about the board members that are leaving?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Margaret, I'm going to miss you on the Board of Education. As a fellow board member, you have shown strength in your leadership. You have questioned with intelligence, thought, and you stood up for our children and community. So thank you. And Kathleen, I've enjoyed our time together on the curriculum committee. I always felt a collegial respect for one another. So thank you. And Nora, your passion for children education as a parent, your students are so fortunate to have you. And as we are all neighbors, I thank you all for your service on the board and your commitment to Ridgefield. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
All right, so it was a busy weekend. We had pep rally at that. A lot of this has to do with the high school, so I am paying a little bit of attention to them tonight, but this is not to say there isn't a lot of other good stuff happening at our elementaries and middles, and I know that we'll hear from Kim Carone tonight. We had a pep rally, we had a bonfire, we had a football game, and while the results were not exactly what we hoped for, the fan attendance absolutely was probably more than what we hoped for. It was packed on a very, very chilly evening. The Tiger Hollow track and turf looked incredible. Thank you to everybody whose hard work, and it's certainly a labor of love, but it truly was a great night out. So congratulations to not only the football team, but for those of you that were there. If you watched the halftime show, that felt like so much more than a halftime show between the band, the cheerleaders, the dance team. Just a wonderful evening. You saw a ton of faculty and staff there with their families, as well as tons of parents, and the RHS Tiger spirit was in-house for sure. 90 East Ridge Road was a little bit starstruck today. There is Mr. Harrigan's Phone, I believe, was a movie that was being I guess they were filming a little bit there over at the Playhouse. They turned that into a high school. In fact, I laugh a little bit because Miss Johnson was looking out her windows and was wondering if the school buses there were going on a field trip. So it was kind of funny because she must have missed the memo that Stephen King was doing some filming right outside our doors. But it was an exciting and busy morning on East Ridge Road. So for those of you that might be starstruck and like to see our building, as you can watch that movie. I think it's coming out on Netflix. I didn't mention that our homecoming dance, we had about 1,100 kids are at RHS this weekend on Saturday. So a big congratulations to them. They not only attended, but they were very well behaved, let's just say, with that many kids in one facility. And it was a great evening for all. And I appreciate all of the staff hard work and being there and helping monitor for a safe evening. So I will turn it over to the rest of all of you for tonight, because I know it's a busy, packed agenda.
That it is. Committee chair, do we have any committee chairs reports for this evening? Kathleen?
It's not a committee chair, but it's the Energy Task Force, which I've been a
Right.
member of for the last year, a new position on our board. And basically, we talked about the RFPs for some of the work that they're doing, they want to do, and we're talking all about the money. But I just want to talk about to other board members that it is a really satisfying committee to be part of, and I would hope people would consider being part of this committee. It does meet during the day, and I promised them I'd put because they were worried that they're so happy to have Board of Ed representation there as they talk about issues. So I come back and talk to the board. So please consider it. It's a really passionate, smart group of people. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Other committee or liaison reports? I don't see everybody on one screen. That looks to be it for tonight. Okay, moving on. First up, RHS student representative. I do see Anch on my screen here.
Hey, and good evening, everybody. Happy November. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. The past 30 days have been action-packed, as Dr. De Silva touched on, so I've got a pretty long spiel for you all today. I'm glad to say that the bounce back year has yet to underperform to its name. We're coming off of one of the most intense spirit weeks that I've ever seen. Kids were constantly posting thousands of pictures with their teachers and friends every day. And when I say thousands, I mean thousands. Having to count those, that's another story. But anyways, everyone loved the themes this year, including USA Day, Rodeo, Class Spirit, and Tiger Pride. I can't even lie to you guys. I was hesitant to see how much participation we'd get this year because 2 out of the 4 grades in the school have never even experienced a quote unquote normal spirit week. But after seeing the excitement on kids' faces when we started on Monday, I know that the week would be amazing. As much as it pains me to say, congratulations to the juniors who absolutely killed it and ran away with the victory, plus $1,000 towards their class council. The fun doesn't seem to end, however, because just like Dr. De Silva said, we had our pep rally as well as our homecoming/senior night football game on Friday. We kicked off the great night with a gigantic bonfire on the field next to Tiger Hollow 2. Kids were totally amped up because this actually hasn't been done in years, not in my time in high school. As for the actual game, I know for a fact that so many seniors were at least thankful that they'd be able to experience watching one last game on Tiger Hollow. The returf field looked spectacular, and everyone agreed that it was worth the wait. The fact that so many students stayed for the whole game in almost freezing temperatures speaks for how excited we all were. The following day, we had our Welcome to the Jungle themed homecoming dance. It seems as though the lack of social interaction in the past 2 years has really energized all of us into taking advantage of every opportunity we could get to see each other. This year, we sold over 1,000 tickets, which is the most amount of participation the school has actually seen in over 20 years. As for sports, almost all RHS teams are in their FCIAC and state playoffs right now. The boys and girls cross country teams have been crushing it. Boys won the state opens and girls came fourth, and both teams actually qualified for the New England tournament, so good luck to them. Girls swim placed second in FCX, and finally, girls volleyball, boys soccer, and girls soccer are all in their state playoffs right now. So in other words, Richfield is on top of their games right now and has no plans of losing. That's all I have for you guys tonight, so thanks a ton.
Thanks so much for that. NEAR representative. Oh, there you are.
Hello, yep. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Mary Ellen Foley. I'm the Vice President of Communications for NEAR. Being the month of November, the theme of tonight's message is gratitude. There's so much to be thankful for in the Ridgefield Public Schools and in our community as we've navigated so many challenges over the past year and a half. We are thankful for the countless hours both negotiating teams put in to reach an agreement for our new teacher's contract, which will be in effect for the next 3 school years. We appreciated Dr. De Silva and the Board of Ed's negotiating team's willingness to listen to the concerns of teachers and their needs. We look forward to ongoing conversations with Dr. De Silva as we advocate for our teachers, who in turn advocate for all of our students. We want to give a very big thank you to Margaret Stamatis, Nora Gatos, and Kathleen Holtz. Throughout their terms, they've been champions of what is best for all of our kids, while also understanding and advocating what is doable for teachers. While navigating the many decisions a school board has to face can be challenging, they took on these roles throughout the pandemic, which made it that much more of a challenge. But they patiently and thoughtfully listened over hours of Zoom meetings and heard the needs of our students and teachers in our district. For all your hard work, your time, and your dedication to the Ridgefield Public Schools, NEAR is truly appreciative and thankful for all that you did for us. This Thursday is Veterans Day, and it's a time for us to reflect and give thanks to all our veterans, most especially those a part of our community. Our teachers are facilitating many events throughout our schools to help students learn about the contributions and sacrifices our veterans have made. Some of the events being held on Thursday are an assembly and breakfast at both Scottsridge and Eastridge, a speaker coming to a kindergarten classroom and a 2nd grade classroom at Scotland. There's letter writing, singing of patriotic songs. Whatever the activity may be, thank you to our teachers for facilitating these events, and thank you to the veterans for sharing their stories with us. On November 2nd, we are thankful that teachers had the opportunity to work within their school communities to continue to work on the many tasks that have filled the to-do list this year. While we're so happy to have our students back in the classroom, we're still learning so much about these continual COVID months, how they've affected them, and our teachers are continually adjusting their lessons and their meeting time with students to adjust to their needs. While we're all focused on rebounding from what we've experienced, we're all still in the regrouping phase to assess what students' needs are, how we can best address them in the school year ahead, while also planning for the future. Teachers were grateful for the much needed time and look forward to more days like last Tuesday to allow them to address and plan for our students' needs. We're thankful for the updated COVID protocols that will continue to support our students in schools. With the vaccine approval for 5 to 11-year-olds and the Screen and Stay program, we're hopeful that this will keep our students in classrooms more consistently. As always, we look forward to continuing working with Dr. De Silva to ensure a safe school environment for both teachers and students. So as we continue to move in a positive direction of resuming activities like Ange described, this weekend was great, that make our Ridgefield classrooms and schools so special. We want to thank our teachers, our school staff, and our community for continually partnering to make these events happen for our students. So we want to wish, it's a little early, but it is the season. So we just want to wish everyone a happy and healthy Thanksgiving season. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. PTA representative.
Hi, everybody. So I won't repeat everything that's been said, so I'll keep it short. Just 2 quick updates with that. Eastridge is partaking in the Veterans Day Assembly on November 10th. And the PTA will be putting together grab and go breakfasts for all the veterans. Their Pride Drive is well underway with 86% of their goal. And right now they have a Sprinkle the World with Kindness initiative going on, where students were asked to do random acts of kindness over the next week leading up to World Kindness Day on November 13th. And Farmingville had their raccoon rally last week, and it was a huge success. They're so thankful for all the parents and teachers who helped make the event happen. They raised more money for this rally than any previous year, and they plan to fund a Be Kind mural and 2 virtual assemblies with Ben's Bells. Their Kids Care Club will be collecting winter coats, winter items for Family and Children's Aid during the month of November. So if you have any, feel free to drop them off. And the PTA is collecting supermarket gift cards for their Thanksgiving donations to the Women's Center in Danbury. Farmingville also had a book fair last month that was successful. And on November 18th, they'll be treating teachers and staff to a breakfast along with snacks the following week. And that's it for this PTA for this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we do have one set of minutes to approve. Do I have a motion to approve the October 12th minutes?
I move that the Board of Education approve the minutes of October 12th, 2021.
Do I have a second? Ken, you second? Okay. Any comments, questions, revisions? There being none, all those in favor of approving the minutes for October 12th, 21, please raise your hands. I think that's everybody. Thank you very much. Okay, now we can move on to the discussion items, starting with the K12 Music Department update.
All right, so good evening, everyone. In just a short minute, I will pass it over to Ms. Gillette and the team of music representatives that we have with us this evening. You may remember, if you can go back a little bit further from last winter when we talked about taking up as many opportunities as we can at the Board of Education table and sharing the work that's happening outside of our academic our primary core subject areas, i.e. math, science, social studies, and talking about the work that's happening in the essential areas, because we recognize how important these essential areas are to us. And we really want to showcase the work that they're doing and also talk about the work that we're hoping to do outside of the budget process. So tonight is really the start of many conversations across all of the essentials that we hope to bring back to the Board of Education table so that we can keep our community and the board informed, but also show the progress that's happening as well as the needs that is happening across these departments. So I'll turn it over to Corey and our team that have really worked hard to collect the information that highlights the most important work that's happening in our school, while also setting the stage for the work to come.
Great. Good evening, everybody. Before we start, I would like to take a minute and have my representative group of the K12 Music Department take a chance to introduce themselves and tell you what role they're in and what school they work with. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Dunn. I teach at Veterans Park Elementary School, and I teach general music, chorus, and band.
Good evening, everyone. Jim Tornatore. I teach at Scotland Elementary School and also chorus, band, general music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Hillary Brown. I teach at Eastridge Middle School, band and general music.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Clavey. I teach at Scottsridge Middle School, and I also teach band and general music.
Hello, I'm Shane Peters. I am the orchestra teacher at both Eastridge and Scottsridge Middle Schools.
With the most amazing background.
Good evening. I'm Mike McNamara, and I teach orchestra at Ridgefield High School.
We are also joined by Linda Johnson, the elementary director. And as a group, we'd also like to extend our thanks to Lisa Fries. One of the new structures that we put in place this year is having 612 building administrators support specific departments. And Lisa is this department's person. So she's the administrator that works with this department during all of our professional learning days. So we just wanted to extend a shout out to Lisa. So Jonathan, can we start with the screen, please? The slides. Thank you. Next slide, please. So Dr. De Silva set this up very well. We are here tonight in one of many upcoming presentations that we are going to do for you on the essential areas, because we do feel, and I know all of you agree, that these departments, these essential departments, are just as important as the core content areas. And we want to make sure that the public, the Board of Education, and the families know everything that these departments are doing each and every day in the schools. I also want to note that these presentations are directly connected to 2 district priorities. One of the priorities is around alignment and collaboration across the grade levels with departments, and that includes spending time together. And that's already what's happened, and you'll hear from this presentation what that time has grown. And what that time what that time has given us that we hope to grow forward. The other district priority that this is connected to is the district priority around evaluating essentials, the schedules, the student experiences, curriculum alignment to standards, looking at the pathways and instructional minutes. So in each of these presentations, just like tonight, you'll hear about the following areas: an overall review of the department, what the vision is of the department, either a brand new vision or perhaps a revised vision, depends on the department. You'll hear about the K12 pathway that students can take as they move their way through the grade levels in that specific department, the levels of participation, and then the different innovations that the department is working on as they're moving forward. Next slide, please. So specifically, that's what we're going to show you tonight around the music department. So the vision, participation rates, that K12 pathway, what the performances are, the innovations that we're working on and hope to work on moving forward. And then, as always, time for questions. So next slide, please. So Hillary is going to start us off with a conversation about the new vision that this department has worked on to put together. Go ahead, Hillary.
Thanks, Corey. Yes, just like Corey said, this is new, and it's in conjunction with the curriculum work that the music department did over the summer. It connects our artistic processes that we talk about when we talk about music education: creating, performing, responding, and connecting. And making sure that that works exactly with our vision of the graduate. And, you know, we're all musicians. We know the benefits of music. It's very clear to us that we're able to hit every single one of those items of the vision of the graduate through what we do with our students, whether we're talking about helping them to be more mindful, communicative, helping problem solve, helping really work on something and not give up. This is all part of what we do. There's a lot of language on this slide. Oh, sorry. I should have said next slide. That was my fault. My bad. There's a lot of language on the slide. This is the music department vision. I'm not going to read it to you, but what I will say is you'll find it on our curriculum documents, and you will find it on our concert programs and music department literature this year and beyond.
And like I spoke about before, this vision came out of the work that we talked about in the spring, where departments were able to meet together and start developing this vision. They continued over the summer and then finalized that vision this fall at the beginning of the year. Next slide, please. So the next part of the department that we want to take you through is the participation rates. There are lots of different programs, as you've heard, and we want to break down for you the different ways that students participate in music K12. So Michael is going to take us through that. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Corey. So we service a lot of kids. We have, there's basically 4 strands of how music is taught in our district. There's general music, There's instrumental music, which can be broken down into two other strands, band and orchestra. And then there's choral music. And as you can see from these numbers on the slide, there's a lot of kids. We have 2,900 plus students taking general music at the K-8 level, 1,130 students taking instrumental music, whether band or orchestra. Throughout the district, that's K-12. 75% of all 4th and 5th graders participate in band or strings. So that's quite a large number for the instrumental program. And these students are all serviced by just 16 teachers. So we definitely deal with a lot of the Ridgefield population. Next slide, please. So here we have it. Our number is broken down by school. So you can see the elementary schools are kind of at the top. 4th grade is when orchestra starts, and 5th grade is when band starts. That's why they're broken out, and you see a 4th and 5th grade for orchestra. Band is only just in the 1 grade, just to give you a sense of where those numbers come from. We didn't talk about chorus yet, and so chorus at the elementary school, all 4th and 5th grade students take chorus. So when you add those numbers up collectively, you get that column to the right. That's not the total number of students, though, because there's a little bit of double dipping. Since all students take chorus, a lot of other students also take band and orchestra. So if you back out the choral numbers, that'll give you a sense of the total number of actual body service for elementary school. And then for the middle schools, so now it's not that. It's an either or model for middle school. So if you look at ERMs and CERMs, you can see the breakout of those performance ensembles there across band, orchestra, and chorus. And then the total numbers there. And then at the high school as well, where we're doing pretty well. We've grown the program pretty significantly for instrumental, and I think Corey was going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're trying to do to help chorus out.
All right, thank you. So one of the things you can see here when you're looking at our participation rates is that one of the points that we are working on currently right now is the chorus numbers as we transition students from middle school into high school. This is something that we noticed happening. It was a downward trend that we noticed happening last year, and we've been trying to figure out what could be causing that. We're looking into different possible areas. One of the things that we know that has hurt chorus more than other other opportunities in music is singing with a mask on, especially in middle school. If you can imagine yourself as a middle school student singing with a mask on 6 feet apart from your friends, where really you only hear your own voice. So it takes a lot of bravery really to sing loud and to be as engaged in singing as you would be when you're shoulder to shoulder, and really feeling the harmony and the presence of your fellow students. So we do feel like that has been a bit of an issue, but we recognize this decline in chorus from middle school to high school, and just wanted you to know that that's something that we've already been working on even as we began this year. Next slide, please. So Mike's going to finish us out.
Right.
Here.
Yeah. So this is just sort of a visual breakout of all the teachers. So we have a number of elementary teachers. Each school has its own resident general music, band, and choral teacher. And then there are also 2 string itinerant positions. That would be Nate Wood and Alexandra McGowan at the bottom. Nate services the south side of town there with Branchville, Farmingville, and VP, and Allie McGowan does Barlow Mountain, Ridgebury, and Scotland. And then at the middle school, each middle school has its own band director and choir director. Those would be the top 4 names. And then Shane teaches orchestra at both middle schools. That's been the model. I've been in the district 15 years, and it's always been that 5 teacher at the middle school model. And then at the high school, we have 1 director each for the various performance ensembles. We have George Baratis, who teaches band, Kevin Haynes, who teaches choir. Kevin also teaches some music tech and music theory courses, and as I said, I do orchestra.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So we already took you through our vision for the department, our participation rates. And now what we want to do is bring to life the pathway that a student would take through the music department from kindergarten through 12th grade. Next slide, please. Ryan is going to start us by talking about elementary school and what that looks like for kids. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. So earlier, Mac explained that there are 4 pathways that you can take in our music program in Ridgefield Public Schools. And the beginning of all those paths is the general music program. So general music is the first musical experience that a student will get in Ridgefield Public Schools. And they will experience general music K through 5 in elementary, and then if they continue, they can go 6, 7, 8 in middle school. Currently, the elementary schedule is based on a 6-day schedule, A through F, with students receiving 2 music classes, general music classes, the first half of the year, and then switching to 1 the second half of the year. In the music program, grades K through 1 will be focusing on developing the singing voice, the ability to hear, feel, and maintain a steady beat, and they will also explore the emotional aspect of music and concepts such as same and different, high and low, fast and slow, loud and soft. Second grade, we focus more on music literacy, so we start to introduce notation, and those students will be learning through studying different pieces of music and also engaging in rhythmic and melodic patterns, whether it's reading or decoding or echoing. They're just building a familiarity, a vocabulary and a familiarity with the program and the patterns. And we also use the program Conversational Solfege, which is a literacy program for music, which introduces sound before sight. So they are hearing rhythms, they're hearing melodies, and then they are moving over to reading melodies and rhythms, and then even creating their own and improvising as well. In third grade, we continue with music literacy, and we also introduce our recorder program, which is kind of a preparation for the instrumental programs that we begin in 4th and 5th grade. Our 4th and 5th grade general music time also includes their choral experience. So during 4th and 5th grade music class, students will be learning choral concepts such as proper singing voice, proper tone production, and they'll also be rehearsing for their concert in smaller groups. We also have 6 rehearsals per concert, so 6 for the winter concert, 6 for the spring concert, where they will get together as a whole grade level and rehearse together, so they're refining their group performance. The orchestra program is for 4th and 5th graders who sign up for it, and it's directed, as we said before, by Nate Wood and Allie McGowan. 4th graders have an opportunity to sign up for one of these 4 instruments, which is violin, viola, cello, and bass. And through the program, they're going to get one 30-minute lesson where they are grouped with their instruments. So if they're in violin, they will be in a group of violins. And that happens once a 6-day cycle, and also a 40-minute ensemble rehearsal where they're kind of putting everything together. In 5th grade, they can continue with an orchestra instrument, or they have the opportunity to sign up for a band instrument. So it's very similar to the orchestra program. You're going to have a 30-minute small group lesson and a 40-minute rehearsal once a 6-day cycle. And the instruments that we offer in the 5th grade program are the woodwinds, flute, oboe, clarinet, bass clarinet, and alto saxophone, brass instruments such as trumpet, French horn, trombone, and baritone, and then percussion instruments, which are drums, cymbals, tambourines, various other instruments, just very all-encompassing kind of family there. So now Jim Tornatore is going to take it away from Scotland Elementary School, talking about the extracurricular opportunities for elementary. Next slide, please.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, everybody. So in addition to our performing opportunities during school, we've added some extracurricular opportunities in the last couple of years. We have the All-District Music Festival, which for students who enjoy their in-school performance opportunities and are looking for a little more musical engagement, they are invited to audition to participate in a district band. That's all 6 elementary schools. The students that audition to be in a band, an orchestra, or the chorus. One of the pictures you saw previously was a picture of one of those performances. Then we also have a amazing string fest that was elementary string teachers Allie McGowan and Nate Wood invite string players from 4th and 5th grade to join in a festival with the middle school orchestra, the middle school chamber orchestra, in cooperation with our middle school teacher, Shane Peters. And we look forward to more opportunities like that. I'm going to turn it over then to Shane Peters to continue.
Thank you.
All
Next
right,
slide, please.
Thank you, Jim. All students in the middle school level are enrolled in a music course that meets every other day that aligns with the A-B rotation. Music Elements, which is our general music offering, is an option for students in 6th through 8th grade who have chosen not to take part in a performing ensemble, meaning band, orchestra, or chorus. 6th grade curriculum focuses mostly on the connection between music and science. Students explore concepts like frequency, pitch, vibration, and more. They also use apps to visualize music on an oscilloscope. Students are also leveraging technology there to put together a presentation on an assigned artist or band. In 7th grade, students begin studying American music through the decades, beginning with spirituals and continuing up through the end of the jazz era. Students also learn about the history of recorded sound from the wax cylinder to digital MP3s and digital streaming platforms. Units in ukulele are also introduced in 7th grade. Students again are using technology to put together a presentation, again, this time on an artist of their choosing. In 8th grade music elements, we pick up where 7th grade left off, and we continue into the rock and roll era, and that goes all the way up through hip hop. Students also are using technology in this course to write, record, and produce their own podcasts. Moving on to choir, choral goals include building a sense of community within the ensemble and appreciation for choral singing, which means exposing the students to a variety of styles and vocal music traditions, as well as developing individual vocal and group choral technique while increasing students' music literacy, fluency, and musical independence. If we move on to orchestra, 6th grade orchestra picks up right where 5th grade left off. Students begin reviewing concepts learned at the elementary level and begin to build on those concepts as the year progresses. All students also participate in small homogeneous lesson groups to allow more individualized attention in order to differentiate and address student needs effectively. In 7th grade orchestra, we're building upon the concepts that were taught in 6th grade. The major curriculum goals in 7th grade orchestra are shifting in new positions on the instrument, low fingerings, and reading in flat keys. Finally, in 8th grade orchestra, we're focusing primarily on more challenging repertoire that utilizes and expands upon concepts taught in 6th and 7th grade. In addition to focusing on more challenging repertoire, 8th grade orchestra is designed to prepare students to continue on to the high school level. Moving on to band. Band functions similarly to orchestra in terms of grade level pacing. The differences are in teaching the band-specific instruments instead of the orchestra-specific instruments. There are still homogeneous lesson groups to address those varying needs. Unlike orchestra, there is a dedicated band director at each middle school, which requires both band directors to work together to provide equitable experiences for all students enrolled in the program. There was a great deal of work done over the summer as well to align the two middle schools and to establish a flow for the band curriculum in grades 5 through 12. Can we go on to the next slide, please?
And Shane, I want to reiterate that while we're pointing out these different points, key points in the progression and the pathway for students, I'm sure that everyone who's listening can hear the work that you all have been doing over time, and especially this spring to calibrate across levels. The consistency and is evident. Thank you.
Yes. Moving on to the middle school music extracurricular course offerings. All middle school extracurricular ensembles are open to all students who are enrolled in a curricular middle school music course. For example, someone enrolled in orchestra can still audition to be a part of the extracurricular chamber singers. All auditioned extracurricular ensembles also travel to and compete at Fantastic Festivals in June, which is an adjudicated festival where clinicians work with the students and directors before spending the remainder of their day at lake compounds. So for the choral end of things, the Chamber Singers is an audition-based ensemble that combines grades 6 through 8. Students who pass the audition will typically sing a more varied and advanced repertoire than students can expect to sing in grade level choirs. So a bit of differentiation there. Musical theater also occurs at both middle schools, typically in the early spring. The musical theater program is also an audition-based extracurricular experience and usually a collaborative effort between multiple teachers at each building. The Chamber Orchestra is an audition-based strings-only group that combines Eastridge and Scottsridge students. The group is capped at 25 players total and plays traditionally upper-level high school repertoire and in some cases early collegiate repertoire, which is pretty impressive for kids that are 11, 12, and 13 years old. The Eastridge and Scottsridge sides rehearse separately for the majority of each semester and then have a combined rehearsal the night before the concert to blend the two schools. The group is open to all 6th through 8th students enrolled in a music course. Symphonic Orchestra is an audition-based full orchestra ensemble, which means it has strings, has winds, and it has percussionists, and again combines Eastridge and Scottsridge students. Though it is an audition-based ensemble, there is no cap on the amount of students that can play in this ensemble. The Symphonic Orchestra rehearses the strings and winds separately at each school, which is about 4 separate rehearsals per week, and then combines everyone to rehearse the night before the concert. The Symphonic Orchestra is typically between 90 and 110 students and plays typical to upper-level high school repertoire. The symphonic winds listed under the band heading are also a part of this group, but rehearse separately from the strings for the majority of each semester. Moving on to the band side of the middle school extracurriculars, the wind ensemble is comprised of students in grades 6 through 8. The instrumentation is similar to that of concert band, meaning woodwinds, brass, and percussion, but with fewer students per instrument. Literature is more advanced than the typical grade level ensemble. Rehearsals are 1 hour per week before school. And finally, the jazz band is also comprised of students from all 3 grades at the middle school. Instrumentation is that of a standard big band ensemble, saxophones, trombones, trumpets, and a rhythm section. Literature ranges from rock to swing and funk. And I'm going to hand it off to Mac to go over the curricular course offerings at the high school level. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Shane. So to pick up where Shane left off, at the high school, we continue, well, at the high school, first of all, music is an elective. So this would be the first time in their careers as Richfield Public School students where they get to choose to take music or not. So any kid that continues on to the high school, really has, gotten a great experience typically out of their earlier experiences and choose to continue. And it makes it a real pleasure to work with that kind of mindset. So moving along, so we have general music for us at the high school takes on a little bit of a different approach. We do music technology and composition. We recently just got a new Mac lab at the high school for those kids to work there. They fundamentally use Ableton, and they use keyboards and other types of notational software and recording software in order to create their songs and learn production skills. We offer a music theory course, which is a semester-based course. I forgot to say music tech is also a semester-based course. Music theory it teaches scales, harmonies, things of that nature, like the building blocks of music. And we also offer, and those are both 9-12 offerings. Kids can take them at any point in their high school career. And then we also offer AP Music Theory. AP Music Theory is a full credit course that goes for the entire year, but that's only available to 10th graders and beyond. For choral music, we offer just one ensemble called Concert Choir, where they basically just take, it's an extension of the skills that they learned in middle school. They learn, some sight singing skills, basic music theory, how to blend, phrase, and do that kind of thing. Strings and orchestra, we offer a concert orchestra, which is also a 9-12 offering, where it's just an extension of the skill set built in the middle schools, where we just expand. Usually they come to us knowing about 3 keys in either direction, up to 3 sharps or 3 flats, and then we start to kind of build upon that and try to get them up to all keys, of which there are 12. We do a lot of bowing mechanic exercises. We really start exploring the use of the bow at that level and trying to get them to be able to do more with that. We teach them about other higher level ensemble skills like cueing each other, and we teach leadership to the principal players. We also have the kids start working a little bit more autonomously. They'll and Shane does a little bit of this at the middle school level too, but they'll work a little bit more frequently in sectionals, where the kids will have a section leader, and we kind of send them to breakout rooms, and then the teacher, myself, acts as facilitator, and we sort of walk around and coach those kids both how to lead and all of that stuff. We coach them on preparation and things of that nature. Once they've completed a year of concert orchestra, they have an opportunity to continue it, and they can just take that course every year, but it's the same course. So unlike middle school, it's like you get 6th grade orchestra, then 7th grade orchestra, then 8th. It's just concert orchestra, and you can take it for all 4 years of high school. So it's made up of 9th through 12th grade students. After that course has been taken, they have the option to audition for Symphonic Orchestra. Symphonic Orchestra is they have that 1 year prerequisite, and then their audition is pretty strenuous. Actually, they're a phenomenal group. They're so much fun to work with. They do upper level, high school to collegiate, and even professional repertoire. At that point, it's more repertoire driven, that course, and then the skill sets necessary to teach for them to perform that repertoire. So they'll do movements out of symphonies the way Tchaikovsky wrote it. It's not watered down or arranged for kids. This is what Tchaikovsky wrote. That group has won many accolades. They were twice nominated. Actually, they were selected to be an honors ensemble for CMEA at the state level. So quite a sophisticated group and a real pleasure to work with. And then for band, we have concert band, which is pretty much everything I said for concert orchestra, which is why we chose to keep the language the same. In terms of how we refer to those two groups. It's the same thing. It's an extension of the skills developed in middle school, where the kids will also do all the same things that I said the concert orchestra does in terms of following a conductor, phrasing articulation patterns, expanding their keys, expanding their range, being able to play higher or lower notes, and things of that nature. And then the band's counterpart to symphonic orchestra would be wind ensemble. So kids would have to do a year prerequisite of concert band and then have the option to audition for wind ensemble, and same stuff. They do upper level, high school to collegiate level repertoire. Again, I know George really enjoys working with them, and the course is much more repertoire driven. So while I'm not going into as much detail with band, with concert band and wind ensemble, it just mirrors what orchestra does, just for wind instruments in terms of the structure of the program. So things are kind of consistent. And then we have a jazz band. We're fortunate in Ridgefield because jazz band is curricular. A lot of districts have jazz band as an extracurricular group, but here we offer it as a class, which is a real pleasure. And that's a 9th through 12th offering. Generally speaking, we discourage 9th graders from taking jazz band unless there's an open seat. Like, so for example, if we don't have a baritone saxophone player, but there's an incoming 8th grader who plays the baritone saxophone well, we would scoop that kid up in order just to keep the ensemble whole, because jazz band is one and apart. But generally it is a select group where an audition is required, and we like to keep that consistent with symphonic orchestra and wind ensemble. The only problem there, again, is that since there's only one and apart, you're kind of at the mercy of what your instrumentation is. But they're an elite group. They're the group that gets requested the most in terms of community events, when people ask us to send them performers throughout Ridgefield. And then we have an applied percussion course, which is a little bit different. The percussion class meets as it's just percussion. So those band classes that were listed earlier, concert band and wind ensemble, don't have any percussion in it whatsoever. It's just wind based, and that's so we can really teach the percussionists how to play more intricate music and really develop their musical skills. It's probably one of the things I'm most proud of at the high school in terms of innovations, though it started 5 or 6 years ago now at this point. So those kids just learn like their rudiments and their sticking skills. And the first half of the year is mostly based on snare drum, and the second half year there's a focus on mallet instruments, which is pitch percussion. And then the concert music to them ends up being rather simple by comparison to what it would have been had they not taken a class like this. And they also play pieces as just a percussion ensemble. And then finally we have symphonic winds, which is we put it here under the curricular course offerings, but it's there's a co-curricular component to it. So what we do with that is it's a pull-out system where I, as the orchestra director, will go in to band classes once a week and pull kids that play the orchestra music to work with them on the orchestra music. And then also those wind kids, though, will meet in the evening about every 3 to 4 weeks or so for a few hours just to kind of put it all together, because I pull out of all the band classes. But it's an effective model, so it can kind of minimize the evening rehearsals and conflicts with sports and other clubs, and we're able to get it done. Then close to the concert, we'll rehearse as an entire orchestra. But those kids get pulled by me once a week. Next slide, please. And so here we have the extracurricular course offerings. Just like middle school, students who are enrolled in a curricular music course are eligible to take one of these extracurricular courses. They're actually kind of all, or most of them at least, are are co-curricular in the sense that we do use classroom time as a means to differentiate instruction for kids that participate in these groups. So Magical Singers is a group of auditioned singers. They're all a cappella. They don't perform with any accompanist. And Nightingales is a student-led group that it's an all-female a cappella group. But that's run with by students, with the director as more of a coach than a director. And then for orchestra, we have chamber orchestra, which is actually run by Allie McGowan, our elementary string specialist on the north side of town. It's an audition process for that group as well. And it's a 9 to 12 offering. It consists of, there is a cap of 25 people on that group. We're not quite at that cap now. I think we're somewhere around 20 or so, rebuilding a little bit from COVID, but it'll come back. And then we also offer Rockestra, which is a student-run group where the students themselves arrange rock tunes to be played by strings. So it's a lot of fun, and they have that opportunity. And then for band, you're looking at Pep Band, which Dr. Silva referenced in terms of the football game the other evening, where they spend pretty much the first 2 to 3 weeks of school like learning all the music in school, but then they do rehearsals on a kind of an as-needed basis in the evening. It sort of depends on what the football schedule is, where they'll rehearse, usually the week of the game, or maybe it like I said, it really just depends. It varies from year to year. But they play, your standard fight tunes, and they get the crowd going during games. It's a lot of fun. They're a great time. And then we have Pitt Orchestra, where we didn't really list the musical theater portion of our program, but Pitt Orchestra is a live orchestra. We're fortunate to have that opportunity for the kids that they provide the orchestral accompaniment for the school's musical, but we didn't want to steal the theater department's thunder because the musical is such a huge part of what they do, but we did want to recognize our contribution to that. So I think that is it for me.
Thank you. Thank you. So next slide, please. So this is just another visual of what we gave you in very fine detail of what the pathway looks for, like for our K through 12 students. Next slide, please. Continue on. Those are our extracurriculars. Again, just another view. Next slide, please. Okay. Team, I'm going to hijack this a little bit. I'm going to just pop through the K12 performances. Next slide, please. So I feel like we have already explained as we went through in detail what the different types of performances look like. We have our traditional performances across the elementary and middle schools. Next slide, please. There's a beautiful photo pre-COVID. We hope to be getting back to that. Next slide, please. And here we have Andy and his group playing outside. That's actually a COVID performance. Next slide, please. And then here are some of our other traditional concerts that we have at the high school in the fall and spring that I'm sure many people are used to seeing and we started to talk about. Next slide. In our descriptions of all the different levels. So our other performance opportunities. Andy, can you talk about this?
Hello, everyone. Andy here. Other performance opportunities, there's a big list of stuff that we send our students out to, and most of these are audition based and things like that, except for the Pep Band. We do get some combinations between middle schoolers and high schools at the time for Pep Band. But the community performances is a really important thing that I wanted to focus in a little bit on. At the high school level, the RHS Jazz Band, jazz combos, and singer-songwriters often perform at the Holiday Stroll in the Lounsbury House. Or our RHS orchestra students perform in quartets and as soloists at the Aldrich Museum. And musicians that perform at the galas often include RHS jazz combos and solo jazz pianists. And it's just like Max said earlier, it's one of the things that it's requested the most. And it's just a wonderful opportunity for students to get out there. They get a little extra experience performing in front of people, and they're doing a great community outreach. And it really is all about building community. Next slide, please. So this is RMS Symphonic, and this is actually the same day that the Jazz played last June. So a wonderful outdoor performance. We're very lucky to be able to pull this off. Next slide, please. And it's going to go to innovations. And I'll go back to Corey.
Thank you. So this is the last part of our presentation where we want to share with you some of the innovations that the department is currently working on and the innovations that we hope to work on. Next slide, please. So we're going to start with, actually, Jim, you already did get to speak about that district-wide music festival.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So-
We look forward to continuing to bring more of these talented students together and more opportunity to bring all schools together on all levels to build that K12 music community and bring it out to the people where they can perform, like you heard so much about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Hillary, want to talk about the lessons at the middle school? That is something new this year.
Yes, this is new this year. So previous to this year, a 6th grade flute player, for example, would be part of maybe 3 sections of 6th grade band where there might be somebody else on her instrument or there might not be. And that would be the instruction she would get. Every other day, she would come into a mixed group of instruments, and that would be her musical experience at the middle school. Now, you might think like lesson groups aren't necessarily innovative in and of themselves. The innovation is how the department was able to find a way to schedule them with 0 impact on FTE and with very, very minimal impact on the student schedule. Right now, the student will, the same 6th grade girl playing flute, I'm sorry for the stereotype, will come into her band class. All of the 6th graders are there together. It is a gigantic full band experience. So she's sitting with all of her flute teammates. Then every 6 days, she has like instrument instruction. Now that period that she would get pulled from another class will change among 4 different options, 4 different slots. So she'll get instruction on her instrument just in a flute class every 6 days, but she won't miss that same class again for another 24 days in the cycle, just because there's 4 opportunities for that to rotate around. So we were so proud of the fact that people were able to come up with a way to provide this without impacting other things. And it's a win-win situation. The kids are doing great with it this year. The other thing I'm going to talk about just briefly for our current innovations is the music festival, and that's just where the 8th graders on band instruments or string instruments are working together with the high school. There's a gigantic festival. It creates the better flow and the pull up from 8th grade up to the high school. And I think that's been, and that also for chorus, and that's been very helpful in pulling up those numbers at the high school and getting the kids engaged throughout and up through high school.
And the other,
toss it over to Shane to talk a little bit more about some other things.
I'm just going to jump in, Hillary, because one thing that Hillary and Andy have talked about with the lessons that they've been able to put in place this year is the social emotional impact of the students working in these small cohesive groups and the community that it's building in a way that they haven't been able to do before. So I just wanted to put in the plug that you all have shared with me.
Yeah,
Shane.
Thanks for the reminder on that. I just to toss it there, the kids are working more than ever like a team, and they're looking out for one another. And I don't know why I didn't anticipate that I was going to see this happen in my classroom, but it's been a fantastic thing to see. So thank you.
Thank you. Shane, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I will pick up with the elementary and middle school string festival. So this is for 4th and 5th grade elementary school students. They come up to Eastridge Middle School, both the Scottsridge feeders on one night and the Eastridge feeders on the other night. We get together, we have pizza, and we rehearse. The elementary school students play their music, and then the chamber orchestra plays our set, and then we combine together and have the middle school students play with the elementary school students, and it's a really wonderful experience. The other current innovation that we have is the outdoor Vpa Festival. So this spawned out of COVID and having to play outdoors, and we just kind of took the ball and ran with it. Last year, we had the jazz band and the Symphonic Orchestra play, and we were able to get local food trucks in, and it really was an incredible outdoor festival-like experience that was really well received by the community. At the high school level, we piloted a mentoring program last year, and this was, again, out of COVID. It began as the brainchild of a Ridgefield High School Orchestra alumnus as a way to connect with students during the pandemic. The high school students would mentor the elementary school students, and it was actually so popular that we actually had to recruit some outstanding middle school students and even some members of the Ridgefield Symphony Orchestra to mentor these elementary school students. And it was so successful that we are running it again this year. Funk Night at the high school. Jazz band students go out into the community and play at local establishments. Usually teachers will form a band at a local restaurant and students come out to play, which will give them a actually real world performance experience. And finally, the collaboration with the Ridgefield Symphony Orchestra has involved members of the RSO volunteering their time to visit RHS and deliver targeted small group instruction. RSO members have held masterclasses for students right here at Ridgefield High School to give the students another point of view when it comes to practicing and performing on their instruments.
Thank you. Okay, so the next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to take us through this, and I do hope that you can see that our excitement and all the different opportunities that students have in our K-12 pathways with our innovations and all of our performances. So one of the things that we have done as a group since and have started to do in real detail since the spring is take a real opportunity to assess our instruments, our equipments, our program. You can hear how much we've worked on our curriculum, and then continue to make goals moving to move our programs forward. And that means that we will be sharing with you what we found in terms of our inventory and our needs for new instruments and new equipment so that we can continue to do all the work that you're hearing about today. In addition, some other ideas we have for innovations are addressing the parity at the elementary level between the choral and the instrumental program, seeing if we can find time to provide more opportunities for students who want to use their instrument, which is their voice. We also want to think about what additional enrichment opportunities we can offer before and after school. You saw all of the ones we have at the middle school and high school. Are there more that we could offer at the elementary school level? At the middle school, you heard a little bit about the integration of tech into the curriculum, but as a team, we're continuing to work on ways that we can provide those opportunities across all the different exposures that students have at the middle school level. And again, like we talked about with chorus, increasing engagement, participation, and retention. We know our kids love music and we want them to get all the opportunities that these programs offer. High school, same thing with participation, more outdoor concerts, real world performances like Shane was talking about, updating all that technology. There's so much out there, that ways for kids to engage, production. We want them to have those opportunities in our courses K-12, and then extend these music lesson programs that you heard Hillary talking about at the middle school level. So we apologize for our detail, but we did want you to hear all the different opportunities that students in Ridgefield Public Schools have from the time they start with music in kindergarten until the time that they graduate. And I hope that we gave you a good idea, a showcase really of all that the K-12 music department in Ridgefield Public Schools have to offer. Thank you so much, and we're open for questions.
Thank you for that very, very detailed and informative overview. I'm sure there's a lot of questions from the board members. Who wants to start us off? Rachel.
I just want to say, wow. Thank you so much for your, sorry, losing my voice. Thank you so much for your presentation, for your passion for teaching music, which is clear, and your current innovations. They are wonderful. I'm happy to support you all. Music can lead to some amazing career opportunities, but also when we speak about mental health, it can be a great outlet for children. This was comprehensive, informative, and I'm so proud of our students. They're phenomenal. I went to Ballard Park last year and it was just out of this world, just a pleasure. So thank you again for sharing your love of music with our children. Thank you.
Well said, Rachel. Sean.
Let me start off by remarking that we have a Teacher of the Year as one of our presenters, Hillary, which was fantastic to see a music teacher in that position. Congratulations again. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of the music program from K all the way through. My daughters both went through every grade all the way up and got a lot out of the program. And I've sat around the table with a lot of these teachers and talked about exactly this stuff and heard from them. It's great to hear. Again, we're investing in curriculum. I've said that before. That's no shock that I'm pleased to see that. But the administration recognizes the work that's happened and is progressing it now in a way that our teachers have been asking for a lot of years. This is huge. I can't underscore that enough, that our essentials are getting this level of attention, and our teachers are allowed to present it in a way that they've seen this for years. This is what they've always wanted. I know that, you know, a lot of on the student side, we lose students between elementary and middle, and from middle to high school. I would ask the teachers, please keep your kids in the music program. It's important not just for our schools, it's important for them. Music is related to math. It's related to a lot of the STEM fields. There's a lot of interconnection there that goes on. It broadens their minds, and the camaraderie that happens behind the scenes in our music programs is absolutely amazing. Our music kids are fantastic. So I would ask our parents to just consider, if your kid's on the fence about it, push them over the fence, keep them in the music program. It's really important to our team as well as to the kids. They get just so much out of it. And that's all I've got to say tonight.
Thank you, Sean. Kathleen.
I was just happy to hear about the access to individual lessons or small group lessons for the children, so it can be accessible to all. And I hope that you look at that as children move forward to the high school, because you want it to be available to those who have the talent, but maybe not have the resources to continue those private lessons. So I think that's such an important piece. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. So one question I have, you mentioned the reassessment of instruments and equipment needed. Is that in a future presentation, or is that part of the board budget presentation? Where do we see that?
I'll jump in there, Jonathan, take Corey off the hot seat for a second. That will be, you'll be hearing about that during the budget process, and likely during the capital part of the budget process, because it is a big ask. Quite frankly, it's a necessary ask. So as much as I say it's big, and I've looked at the work that this team and folks that are not on this screen have done in order to really assess what the needs are. And Sean, it may have been you that mentioned, paying attention to the essentials. We said that we would pay attention to the essentials, but we're really paying attention to the essentials. And this is an area that I think, as I started out saying at the beginning of this presentation, when it's not a core subject area or something that's not measured by a standardized test, literally, I think it can be neglected. And it's time at minimum to draw light to the essential areas. This is one that we've started off with that we haven't paid attention to in terms of the material resources, and perhaps even some human resources. I heard the team speak about outside of the school day and what that's going to look like, but you will hear about it during the budget process. That work has been done. Again, for the folks that are on this Zoom, they've done the heavy lifting in terms of really assessing what we have in our schools, what we don't have in our schools, and thinking very thoughtfully about what is necessary, and coming to the Board of Education and the other governing bodies in our community and saying, hey, if we're going to say that we're an arts community and that's what we value, then let's say that that's what we value. And so, hopefully we can rally around that during the budget process, along with some other things that are important as well. But again, the folks have done a lot of the heavy lifting, and you can expect that we'll be communicating that out during the budget process.
Great. I don't recall seeing that on any capital request over the last 4 years. So looking forward to seeing that. Other board questions? There's probably not a lot of questions because of the amount of detail that you took us through, and we appreciate that.
And just a special thank you to all these teachers for coming out, for rehearsing, for putting everything together, for being amazing. We're really, really lucky to have them. And I know that you all appreciate them just as much as we do. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
We thank you for hearing us, and thanks for your support.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, moving on from music and fun to enrollment projections and demographics.
So Mr. Zuba, who is now part of the SALAM collaborative, is here. Mike, I think you made some edits on your presentation.
I did. So I sent the new version over to Cheryl. She'll have it posted tomorrow, and I'll try to just call out some of those changes, but you'll see them along the way because they were fairly obvious what I had to change.
So you probably figured it out when you were looking through the presentation this weekend, and for all of the eagle eyes, I didn't catch it. So I have to thank Jonathan for pointing it out to us, but thanks, Mike, for making that correction. And so I think everyone here knows Mike Zuba. He was with us last year going through the enrollment projections. So I'm going to really send it off to Mike, and he'll lead us through. Mike, we have someone behind a screen here. His name is John.
Okay.
So as you would like the slides to transition, you can just say, next slide.
All right, you got it. And I could, am I sharing my screen or no?
Yeah, Dr. Silva, he's sharing his own screen.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
All right, I got it right. Can everybody see my my screen? If not, let me know. All right, I got a thumbs up there. So tough act to follow on all the great information on the music programs throughout Ridgefield. Hopefully I won't bore everybody with the enrollment projection update, but considering it's done during a pandemic, maybe that'll make it a little more interesting than usual. So where we always begin is taking a look back at how the projections prepared last fall, performed overall, and in Ridgefield, like many of our clients, we run 3 different models to ensure that if we're projecting out over a time frame of 10 years, those models can capture any changes in events, not only locally, but worldwide, that can lead to different trajectories in those enrollment drivers. So overall, all 3 models fared fairly well, with the high model actually coming in the closest at just the difference of about 30 students overall for the K12. The medium model came in at just 55 students overall, 1.2%, and then the low model lagged behind at just under 2%, or almost 90 students. So all 3 models were below the actuals that came in, and that was something that was in the back of my mind, especially working from the 2020 enrollment and just knowing how much different of a year each of the last 3 years actually were throughout all of my clients' districts, or all my clients' school districts and the enrollments there. So taking a look at our median projection model for the individual or the actual elementary school level, kindergarten enrollment was where we projected 290 students, through some greater returns there, and we'll touch on some of the driving factors. There were actually 300 students. Second grade as well, we had a little bit of a disconnect overall there, with 321 students coming in as the actual. We had projected 308, so there was 13 extra students over what we were factoring in our projection. But overall, for the elementary school system, just 30 students off. The middle and high school were on par, with the middle school just deviating by 4 students, with just a handful of students either high or low in each given grade. And the same can be said at the high school level. So we go through a lot of detailed analysis where I'm looking at home sales, looking at students generated from that, tracking home sales by attendance zone, looking at the individual demographics within there in hopes of being able to really target that single-digit area deviation for all of the individual elementary schools. So I think this year, even in light of the pandemic, the overall individual schools fared fairly well. Most of the schools were within a handful of students. I do know Ridgebury overall came in 10 over what we had projected, as well as Veterans Park. One of the big areas that we saw a disconnect was at Veterans Park in that kindergarten grade. I believe the 49 students as of October 1 of this year is a very large jump over the kindergarten enrollment last year. But looking at what we had projected at 34, that's a 15 student difference there as well. So that's going to have a little bit of a bearing as I put out the new enrollment projections for the individual schools. It puts Veterans Park on a little bit of a different trajectory than we had originally from last year's projections, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. Looking at the 2 middle schools themselves, both were within a handful of students. The biggest deviation there was really at Scotts Ridge, where we had projected 171 and the actual came out at 181 for the 6th grade, but overall within 9 students. And then East Ridge we had projected 505 and actually came in at 500, with the sixth grade there returning a little bit lower than what we had projected overall. So they performed really well overall, considering, it was, I believe, our second year now that we have the middle school pattern that was fully phased in is now in place. So how the students matriculate through, that's now mathematically built into the model with a little bit of history there. One of the new pieces of information that came out for the U.S. Census, we forgot all about it, that it was fielded in 2020. They've been so far behind with the pandemic of being able to get the information out there. We do have the total population for Ridgefield at 25,030. It's about a 400 person increase, or 1.6%. The Connecticut DOT has population projections out there. I don't believe they've been updated with the new census data. However, they had a pretty good alignment with it, so we included it, showing just some continued gains there overall. What we would typically be getting about this time, about a year and a half to 2 years after the fielding of the 2020 census, would be cohort level population data, things like fertility rates, females of childbearing age, population by various age groups and 5-year cohorts. Unfortunately, that information is great for doing birth projections and other town-wide demographic analysis. It's just still, unfortunately, lagging behind throughout in the United States. Looking at the overall unemployment rate, the huge spike that we've all been witnessing in the news, part of all of our day-to-day lives, is starting to come down a little bit. The red line shows Fairfield County, the green line shows Connecticut, and the blue line shows Ridgefield overall. Ridgefield mirrors that of the larger bodies themselves, but at a much lower rate. What we did see in the past year, and I'm doing the annual average of the year to date so far, is a improvement there overall, not only at the state and county level, but also at the local level. But more so than the unemployment rate, I think what everybody's experiencing throughout Connecticut, many parts of the Northeast, is just the change in the commuting patterns, the work environment, everything that's been tied to the pandemic, that is really driving a lot of our local housing conditions. That's something that we all need to keep an eye on as trends unfold in the near future. So looking at single family home sales as well as condominium sales, this is data that we get through the Warren Group. So basically it's a clearinghouse for MLS listing services. What we're seeing is last year we had an estimate for the total single family homes, and when the 2020 number came in, it slightly exceeded that estimate. So in 2020, we ended up at about 466 single family homes overall, or 553 total sales, including condos. We have year to date from January through August, and we've extrapolated that out for the full year. We're looking at to be somewhere in that 460 to 470 range for single family homes when it comes to a close of the calendar year. But overall, really strong numbers. It's the looking back, I guess, the number of years we haven't seen numbers in Ridgefield like this sales wise since really the early 2000s. If you're looking back for not only total sales, but single family sales, and then condominium sales have averaged about 90 over the last 5 years. I pulled together the median sale price for not only the full year last year, but also the year to date, and that also runs through August. And I wanted to take a step back and take a look at the larger region, just to be able to track those prices historically. And what you'll see on the spaghetti chart to the left in Ridgefield, in that bolder black line, is really that historic trend going back, the better part of almost 30 years, 31 years. Makes me feel old now saying 1990 was 31 years ago. But what you'll see overall is that many of the other communities throughout the region have also experienced this big uptick in the last year, with single family prices kind of driving up through the roof. When we took a look back and looked at sort of the time of the Great Recession back in 2007, 2008, before prices really collapsed in that time frame, and then really benchmark 2021 year to date off of it, you'll finally see the state as a whole, as well as many of the communities, have finally exceeded what was once the prior peak of the single family sale prices. So I'm really at that full recovery there overall, but it's something that's happening not only within the community of Ridgefield, but also throughout, with year to date at just under $800,000 for median single family home sale prices. Contact with the planning department and pulling the most recent data from Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development. Really not much happening as far as new permitting activity going on right now. There's no really large scale developments that are anticipated to generate school age children that have come in front of the commission for approval within the last year. Pulling the single family permit data shows that last year ended up at about 20. This year to date is about 9, and that's running January through July. So if you were to look ahead, that figured it would probably be about that same number going forward. So really stable numbers of new units coming online, smaller lot splits here or there, generating new single family homes, but nothing compared to what was happening 20 plus years ago. So as part of our analysis of really trying to be as accurate as possible going forward with those individual school enrollment projections, and really at certain grade levels that have been just traditionally hard to project, especially at the lower elementary school, we collect and purchase through Warren Group housing sales that have address specific information. So we're able to put them into our geographic information systems, address match where those sales have occurred, and then have the student enrollment database address matched as well, and go through and look at sales that are generating students that are new to Ridgefield Public Schools. So by tracking state IDs, looking back in the history and see if the student was enrolled in Ridgefield Public Schools before, we're able to determine the number of new students that have arrived via a home sale over a designated period of time. And for this analysis, we've used January through September 30th, and then we compare back to October 1st of the prior year. So I've been doing this for a number of years for Ridgefield Public Schools. This year came in at 0.37 for the student yield. Last year, we were a bit lower at 0.33. Historically, I went and looked back, and I believe we were about 0.36 and 0.37 for 18 and 19, and right around that same range, give or take a 100th of a percentage point, going back historically a number of years. So it's on par with the yields that we've seen in the past, but we're having a much greater number of home sales overall. So we're getting more new students to the district. So we had 92 sales that yielded students. One of those had 4 students, 7 had 3, 43 yielded 2, and then 41 had 1 student. A majority of those are in the elementary, a smaller number in the middle school, and even a smaller number in the high school, with we're seeing a lot more of students in those lower elementary grades. When we took a look at the home sales relative to the attendance zones, and this is just looking at a percentage of the total during that period of time, which is January through September 30th. Barlow Mountain is typically one of the areas that has, the higher percentage or the greater number of home sales overall, followed by Veterans Park in any given year, with Farmingville being sort of on the lower end there, and Ridgebury, Scotland, as well as Branchville, somewhere in between there. So when we tracked it out, not only in the stacked bar charts based on grade, but also looking at the total distribution of students, we're seeing that Ridgebury has the highest number of students from home sales, almost 30 overall, a yield of 0.5. So for every home sale, we're getting half a student that is a registered student within Ridgefield Public Schools at Ridgebury. Barlow Mountain and Scotland have the lowest number of students generated from home sales, and Barlow Mountain also has the lowest yield. So as we factor in the activity that we're seeing in the local housing market, and we project going forward, we use this information to be able to sort of fine tune the cohort level analysis that I'll talk about in a couple slides, in order to be able to really get those projections dialed into what's happening locally. So this is absent of the home sale. So this is just looking at the geographic location of new to district students. So pretty much the same exercise, but they could be students that are living with another relative, students that came from a home sale, as well as students that are in a home that is for rent. So what we did is compare this SACID IDs from one year to the next, geocoded and mapped the location of those students and did a little hotspot map to look at where we're seeing the greatest concentrations of new to district students. So what we had through this exercise was about 340 overall. It was just over 90 more than we saw last year in 2021. So about a 40% increase. And we're seeing clusters, around the major subdivision areas where you do have some housing density, but really seeing in Ridgefield, Ridgeberry, Farmingville, we do have a big cluster right around the border of Veterans Park here, and you can see the attendance zones and the very faint black lines there. So we do have areas that are more popular or more prone to having housing or having new students move into the district, and this helps us also fine tune those enrollment projections going forward. So looking at the birth trends, it's been pretty stable births overall. I think one of the things that I look at from a demographic standpoint is when you begin to see the typical birth cycles of smaller populations where you have these peaks and valleys from one year to the next. So back in 2018, we were at about 152 or 150 births, and then peaked up to 176, back down to 151. And then I was able to get through the town clerk the year-to-date births for 2021, which runs January through the full month of September. There was actually 144 there. Extrapolating those out based on a historic percentage, we're estimating that yield to be about 185 for the full year of 2021. And then we ran 3 different mathematical models going forward of looking at different scenarios for births in order to be able to do 10-year enrollment projections. And we have a pretty tight banding of between 173 to 213 births overall. And this is really that regression-based birth projection that I've been doing for a number of years here, and that's absent of any demographic information. So what this will do is these will feed into the respective models in order to be able to yield future kindergarten students out in really that second 5 to 10 year window of our enrollment projections. So for a number of years of looking at birth decay, and it's in Ridgefield as well as many of Connecticut's more well-regarded districts and suburban communities, where we look at the relationship between kindergarten shown in the kind of reddish orange line and then in the more aqua color births 5 years prior. And we're seeing that the gap represents really that birth decay ratio, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And the birth decay ratio back in the early 2000s was much tighter. So there was much less immigration of students that were into the community versus those that were born in the community. And then you'll see over time that they were on divergent trends where that band is widening. And you'll see the big gap between births 5 years and then this year's larger kindergarten class, really indicating some of those parental choices due to the pandemic of students delaying entry into kindergarten up until this year. So this is really the same information, but I'm able to disaggregate the births from 5 years prior versus decay immigration. And this is a little bit different than what was in your package. I realized I had the wrong legend on it, a little versioning issue, and I do apologize. But what this shows is that going back a number of years, the students that are kindergartners that aren't born within the community made up a much smaller percentage versus in the most recent past, the students that are migrating into Ridgefield between the ages of 0 and 5 are making up a much larger percentage of your overall kindergarten class. And that's something that we've been successfully modeling into the projections for at least the last 5 years. This is just to be able to include your historic enrollment. I think the stacked bar chart does a good job of sort of telling the story of the waves of enrollment and as they move through the system. And you could clearly see in the last 2 years, this flattening of the enrollment where you've actually had a little bit of an enrollment gain overall and about 100 student enrollment gain in the elementary enrollment, shown here in the light blue. So as part of our projections, we look at a lot of different building blocks. I've touched on a lot of those data drivers in the prior slides. All of this gets formulated into the model that we use to be able to project enrollment going forward. But really sort of the baseline of it is this cohort survival, which is really the standard enrollment projection model. What we then do is we make some modifications to it. The cohort survival model really relies on the past being a good predicator of what's going to happen in the near future. And, you know, by and large, that works. However, where you have really good data and really good information, and you know that there's maybe something coming down the pipeline that's not getting captured in the historic part of it, that's where you would add those external forces in. And it really does produce good grade level specific projections that can be done at the individual school level, like we do here in Ridgefield. And it factors in all of those enrollment drivers that I talked about in order to simplify the process and be able to give an output that is reliable, not only for budget planning, but also for facility planning. So as part of this cohort survival and these persistency ratios, anything over 1 shows that there's a growth from that cohort from 1 year to the next. And you could see going back a number of years, a lot of growth within your birth decay, and the numbers going back into the mid 2000s, they don't reflect the full decay. So they're a little bit more subdued there and lower versus when you started to bring full decay online, you raised your persistency ratios for that. Back in 2020, 21, it dipped to 1.65. It wasn't astronomically low for Ridgefield, but it was lower than you know, what we had seen in the year before that at 1.85. This year saw 1.88, so enrollment definitely rebounded and yielding that kindergarten class of 300. But we also saw a big uptick across the board in many of the grade cohorts. Some of the most notable are in those lower elementary grades, where we saw a 12% increase in K-1, as well as an 8% in 1 to 2. This is on par with many of the other communities we're seeing trend-wise, with just either new students moving in or parents opting to send their child into school that may not have been part of the program in the prior year. Back in 2020, you had a negative migration, so you actually had out migration for the first time on record, going back to 2005, I believe 2006. And this year saw a positive immigration of 3%. It wasn't astronomical. It was actually on par with some other large years, most notably 2016 and 17, and then 2013 and 14. So that 3% immigration was high, but it didn't really jump out as it did in some other communities where, due to COVID and due to a lot of the housing market conditions, it doubled and even tripled in some of those communities for immigration this year. So for our projections assumptions, we're planning on having 50 pre-K students enrolled each of the next 10 years. We're also assuming that those enrollment drivers will prove accurate. So as we go through and we model out low, medium, and high projections, we have to make some assumptions. I talked about the birth assumptions already. We're looking at the high model averaging 200 births annually, the medium averaging 190, and then the low projections averaging 185 annually for those years that we don't have birth data. We're also looking at, for the high model, the elevated housing sales and housing market conditions, assuming that it stays in place for the next 3 to 5 years. The medium model says that those elevated sales levels would only last for the next 3 years, and then the low projections are assuming that it lasts 1 to 2 years. We've also made some assumptions on student immigration. So we talked about having a 3% immigration for this past year being rather high. The high model looks at it averaging, and it changes every year, but roughly 1.7 to 2% for the next 10 years, whereas the medium model averages 1.4% to 1.6% over the next 10 years. And then the low model averages just over 1% up to 1.3. And these align pretty well with what your 20-year history of immigration that I've looked at, that I have on file, So I wanted to be able to pick elevated conditions within there that really mimic the levels that you've experienced in the past as we model those forward. So we have realistic assumptions as our enrollment drivers really out in those last 5 to 10 years of the 10-year projection. So we developed the 3 different models. They each kind of follow this similar trend with just a different range within the banding themselves. We're showing that the enrollment shows a pretty good flattening out over the next few years, with a trough likely to occur in the medium and high model, right around the midpoint of the projection. The low model, shown in the mustard color, has a trough occurring at the same time, but just really leads to a flattening out and no real rebound, whereas the high model shows a pretty decent rebound of enrollment, getting back to about 4,700 students, really the point where you were at in 2018-19, and then the medium model showing a slight recovery, really getting back to almost where you are today. So really looking at that trough, but what it talks about overall is that we're seeing different dynamics at each of the different grade level groupings, and that's what I'll get into on the next several slides. So looking at the big picture for the elementary, we're showing some stability there, and some slow growth over the next 10 years, eventually reaching 2,000 students by 29-30. Really flat middle school enrollment. And then the high school is where we're going to continue to have some of those smaller cohorts matriculate through the system and really reach the bottom of the enrollment overall in 26-27 at just over 1,300 students, and then have a very slow recovery as those larger grade cohorts graduated, and they're now replaced with cohorts of equal size. So that's why you really have that flattening overall as the waves of students move through the system. And this does a much better job than I can to describe it, of what the overall enrollment looks like. So here in the upper left is just your district-wide enrollment projections, really what I've already walked you through. And this looks at the middle school enrollment or the elementary school enrollment overall, with that slow growth in the first 5 years of 2.5%, and then a 4% growth those last 5 years. And then the middle school enrollment is going to decrease in the immediate future, but then begin to stabilize and have some modest growth at 2.5% over the 10-year window. And where we have the biggest decline is projected at the high school level in that first 5 years, as you look at reaching sort of the bottom of your enrollment there, and then a very modest rebound in the last 5 years, getting back to about 1,350 to just under 1,400 students overall. So I'm looking at the 10-year forecast for the individual elementary schools. A lot of the schools are relatively stable with some modest gains and losses over the next several years, and you could track those along this chart in the upper left. Looking at Veterans Park compared to what we had projected just last year, we saw that larger kindergarten class as well as some immigration there. So that's one of the schools that we're projecting an increase there of about 14% in that first 5 years. And then having some stability there overall in the next 5, and really overall stability across all the elementary schools in that last 5. And I think what you could see, just what bore out in the enrollment where we had that 100 student increase at the elementary level from last year to this year, is just each of the schools responding, where each school had an increase in K-5 enrollment over the last year. Looking at the individual middle school enrollment, we're projecting East Ridge to be very stable over the first 5 years, with just a small decline there of just over 1%. Scotts Ridge is projected to increase by just under 50 students over that same period of time, so about a 9% growth. And then looking in that last 5-year window, we're looking at some pretty stable enrollments there overall, with East Ridge averaging between really 490 and 500 students in Scotts Ridge, in the 560s, and averaging 566 students over that 5-year window. So ending up with a gap between the two schools of about 70 students at the end of 10 years. And this is just a wrap up, but I'll just leave this up there. This just kind of reiterates a lot of the key points I had I talked about, and I'll turn it over to the board if there's any questions. Thank you.
Who wants to start us off with the board questions? Sean, you're up.
Yeah, I saw your census demographics show Ridgefield growing by about 10% over the next, I don't know, I don't remember the chart, I have to go back, but 6 to 10 years. But I've seen other stats that shows losing 15% of our population over the next 10 years. And I'm having trouble reconciling those two.
Yeah, there's 3 different projections out there that show 3 different data points. And I'm going to just try to pan through without making everybody dizzy to find that slide, Sean, so bear with me.
Yep.
There it is right there. Yeah, so I pulled the DOT projections. I looked at the state data center. The state data center had a much different trend. It wasn't really reflecting the growth. I sent a couple questions in to the DOT this fall. I haven't got a response yet to see exactly what they're feeding into that. I didn't develop this. I'm using a different source out there for it. But I wanted to put it out there because with the growth this past year and some of the trends we're seeing, I'm just curious to see if they're running new models, especially with all the infrastructure bill funding. They run their projection models to help determine those priority areas to get some of that federal funding. But I have recognized that there are different models out there that send Ridgefield and many other communities in different directions.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between up 10% and down 15%. And I'm not a demographer. I don't understand any of this stuff. It's just math. But it just seems that there's a huge difference, and we could be, and I've seen the enrollment projections over the last few years where we have underperformed significantly. And I just fear that we build for something that may not be true.
Yeah. I put this in there as a data point, but this does not go into the model that I'm working with.
Thank you.
Yep.
The board questions. Dr. De Silva, you had a question?
Mike, if you wouldn't mind, yes, thank you, Jonathan. Would you just clarify the preschool enrollment? Because that's a little bit different in our community, obviously, because our primary focus is our student with learning differences, and then we obviously try to match peers. Can you talk a little bit about that number 50 and how you got to that number?
Yeah, I will do that. Let me open up my pan ahead here, and hopefully I don't make everybody dizzy. So what I typically do when I plan on pre-K, because it's almost something that's impossible to project, especially where you have the 50-50 program with typical peers. So I just really use your last enrollment as the jumping off point, where in 21-22, you've had 51. So I just round down to 50 and use that as really a plug number, but know that you're going to be somewhere in that range based on the size of your program. And when you look back historically, it's really going to be based on the number of students of need that qualified in that given year, and then the match. And there's really no way to project that going forward. So it's more of a plug number rather than a demographic projection.
Thank you.
Other questions? Margaret?
I have one on page 23, the first bullet point that said elementary school enrollments are projected to gradually decline until 2023 to 24. Maybe I'm misreading, but it looks to me like the data on 23 and as well as on 24 actually shows that the trough was actually before that. It's actually going up now, not that it's decreasing to 23. Page 23. Yeah, that first bullet point. And it's important because that's a talking point that often comes up at budget time. So I want to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, and I do have, so the reason I wrote that the way I did, it's just because between 22 and 23, you're going to have a slight dip of 3 students there, but that could really probably say enrollment's going to be flat.
Yeah, I just, again, because I know a lot of people use this at budget time and would be talking about, still the declining enrollment and the elementary schools when actually it's flat, or actually even it increased even from last year. So I think
yeah, good point on that one. I'm gonna edit that and then send it back out for the revised version. Thank you.
My other question had to do with Scott's Ridge. So, and I guess this is just, for the board, I'm sure, probably not a surprise that this topic is coming up, but seeing, what the projections are for Scott's Ridge increase over the next few years, but also just even where they are now in terms of how many more students they got. I know we've talked about it, at enrollment time before, but I know we even had a conversation over the summer. So I put it out there. I think it seems like the time is now where some action might need to be taken in terms of figuring out the Scott's Ridge enroll capacity.
Yes, Margaret, just if that's okay, Jonathan, if I can just chime in there, if the board remembers, in one of our last meetings of the strategic planning committee, we expected to come back in June, and that meeting was actually, it was changed due to a couple of different things. And so we were expected to come back and bring our 2 middle school principals to talk about when that enrollment impacts the student learning experience, whether or not the physical plant can actually support it. So even if we thought it was a good idea to keep the schools uneven, what does it say about the physical plant? What does it say about the learning experience? And if not that, then what? And so, Margaret, I think you bring up a good point for our first strategic planning meeting and setting that course, because it's a fair conversation based on these projections.
Yes. We're not looking to have another 50 additional students at Scott's Ridge, or 80 more than at East Ridge a couple of years from now. One question I had, I don't have last year's numbers in front of me, but it seems like these projections bring the high school trough in a few years, as far as when we hit lowest enrollment in the high school. Is that right?
Yeah, and I can get right to that, Jonathan. Hang on one second. So this has us at 26, 27 of getting at 13, 11 would be the trough for the high school. And I'm looking at our projected, and I just pulled up last year's report, very tiny here on my bottom of my other screen. And we had it at 26, 27 there as well at 1309. So it's right on that same kind of course of really kind of bottoming out in that same year.
Okay. Other board questions? Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks everybody. I'll send out that one revision and enjoy the rest of your meeting. It was good seeing everybody.
Thanks. See you live next year.
All right, hopefully. Take care.
All right, next up, screen and stay update. Is that you, Dr. De Silva?
I'll kick it off in just a second to Aaron. So this will be a brief update. We communicated to our families on Friday. The State Department of Education, along with the Connecticut Department of Public Health, has indicated that we can shift the model of how we contact trace for students who might be exposed to COVID here at school. You may also remember that this has been by far the greatest challenge that we've had this year and last year in COVID, when we've had to contact trace, number one, but place students in quarantine that, quite frankly, are healthy. And so the loss of the learning experience, physical learning experience, has been impactful. And I know that I don't stand alone when I speak to the challenges that has faced, not only for our kids, but also our families who have to work and are oftentimes having to be home with their children. So we have shared those concerns. When I say we, myself, along with my colleagues, superintendent colleagues, to the Connecticut Department of Public Health, and as well to our superintendent's group, to the State Department of Ed. And thankfully, there has been a shift to the model. And so Aaron is really here tonight to go into a little bit of a further detail around the model, which we call screen and stay, or they call screen and stay, and what that will look like for our students' experience here. And quite frankly, for us, I can tell you that And this is not only us here on this Zoom, but also us, meaning our health director and our medical advisor. It is very, very good news. So we are just so very glad to be able to keep our kids in so long as they are healthy to do so. So there are some structures and some requirements, but generally speaking, this is a really positive shift. So Aaron, I'll kick it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. De Silva. I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the positivity of this shift. Dr. Jithani, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Health and the Governor, announced on Thursday the Screen and Stay program, which school districts have an option to opt into, and families also have an option of whether they would like to participate or not. So instead of quarantining students who would otherwise be required to quarantine under the previous COVID-19 rules, these students will have the option of continuing to come to school every day for 14 days, as long as their parents sign a form and state that they're free of COVID-19 symptoms. And the reason that this change is able to be made right now, at the beginning of the school year, we didn't know how Delta would impact our in-person learning. We didn't know how many cases of Delta would spread from student to student in classrooms, as opposed to the original variant of the virus. But now we know in Ridgefield, as well as across the state of Connecticut, and studies that were cited by the CDC and that the Department of Public Health cited as well, that it's very rare when other mitigation efforts like mask wearing are in place in schools for student-to-student COVID-19 transmission. There have been some cases of it. By and large, the majority of transmission has been from adult to student rather than from student to student. And now about 93% of our staff are fully vaccinated, which eliminates a major source of transmission for COVID in our schools. So this is a welcome change. We are very excited that for the most part, there will be very few students who will need to be quarantined at all going forward. There are some exceptions, however. Screen and Stay only applies when the exposure happened in school during the school day when masks were being worn. So for example, at lunchtime, if students are sitting closer than 6 feet to each other with their mask off, those particular students would need to quarantine per addendum 5, which would be getting a test on day 5 after exposure and returning on day 8. Students who are exposed to COVID-19 at school during the school day would not then be able to screen and stay into their extracurricular activities or athletics or youth sports or anything like that. For example, if they go to dance after school, they would still need to follow other DPH guidance for those types of situations. The purpose of Screen and Stay is to get the kids back into the learning environment as quickly as we can and allow them to continue their education. Those are the basic rules. That's the way the program has been put to us. There is a specific guidance document that was released within the last 72 hours by the state. We will be providing some further information for families who are impacted and giving them all those details as individual cases do come up. As it was said earlier this evening, the vaccine is now available for 5 to 11-year-olds. And I know that many students and families in Ridgefield are taking advantage of that, which will further decrease the amount of transmission that we're seeing of the virus in the community. As DPH Commissioner Dr. Jithani stated on Thursday at her press conference, this is hopefully the beginning of the first off-ramp from the pandemic and slowly starting to release and relieve some of these extreme measures that have been in place for the last year and a half for all of us. It will depend on what happens with the numbers. The DPH said Screen and Stay is here through the fall, but they weren't willing to commit to extending it into the spring at this point in time. They're closely monitoring the numbers, looking at how many cases pop up in individual schools and individual districts. There are 37 school districts right now who are participating in this federally funded screening testing, which is something that we're doing here in Ridgefield. We have close to 500 students currently signed up for that program. We've run about 700 COVID tests so far, and of those 700-ish, give or take a few, we've only had one come back positive. So what that tells us is it doesn't appear that we have a large number of asymptomatic cases in our school buildings right now, and that is great news. The numbers of COVID in Ridgefield have been steady. They've been on the low end of what we've seen over the last 18 months. The COVID is still present in our community. It's definitely here. It's not going anywhere. With the cold weather, it's possible that we may see a bit of an uptick. We're being vigilant, but now for those who want to be vaccinated, they've had the opportunity to do so. And we know that COVID doesn't easily spread from student to student in our elementary classrooms. Therefore, this is really the appropriate time to start easing up on some of the mitigation efforts and allowing kids to spend more time in the classroom. So it's great news. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Aaron.
One other piece that that the governor did say in his press conference was there were questions around masks and whether or not this would shift any mask wearing or when we would anticipate that there would be a shift in mask wearing. And at that point, the governor did say that he didn't anticipate a change until at minimum, it sounded like until after the Thanksgiving holiday, perhaps the December holiday. So we'll wait and see on that, but we don't have any additional information on mask wearing. And I know that many families are anxious to hear that mitigation measure is being lifted, but not quite yet. So, hopefully that's on the horizon if it makes sense to do so, but we're not at that point.
Thank you. Questions? Margaret?
My question had to do with I guess it's in the first bullet point of exclusively during the school day. It's got the requirement of as long as 6 feet or more of space was consistently maintained. I just wondered, I've got to imagine, it even talks about being on a bus. I can't imagine 6 feet.
Yeah.
So can you help explain for us what might be excluded under that particular?
Right. So my understanding and my colleagues' understanding is that the 6 feet applies to periods of time when they would be eating lunch or having snack. So during the period of time when the mask is off, 6 feet need to be maintained. But otherwise, the 6 feet doesn't apply.
Any other questions? Thank you for the update. It does sound like a step in the right direction. Look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Good time.
Thanks. Moving on to busing.
All right, so I'm going to turn this one over to Dawn. It is a very, very brief update. So that's the good news. I realize that it's late, but we did want to take every opportunity that we can during these board meetings to give the Board of Education an update on the progress of our work, specifically related to our district priorities. So Dawn, I know you have a one-liner here tonight, but
pretty much. Yeah, I just wanted to share a very, very brief update on as the business department works through our goal to study the transportation practices. Some of you may have received, but we released a survey this past Wednesday to all parents. And I hope to bring the results of this survey to you at one of your future board meetings. In addition, I wanted to let you know that we have started reviewing organizations and trying to find the best one that is suited to partner with us as we work towards the request for proposal busing review that we need to do later this year. Very brief.
All right. Any questions on that? Thank you, Dawn. How's our new conference room coming along?
all right. So Dawn and Wes are here to speak about that and looking for the board's approval to go into a different direction in terms of going out to bid. So I'll turn it over to Wes or Dawn, whichever one wants to take the lead.
I'll take the lead. So I'll make this brief because we've been here for a while, but I'll have you know that I did remove some slides from the mini presentation I'm doing just for time. So one thing we've done is when we started looking out for vendors to outfit the place, there's a few things that we want to consider. One is shortages. Two is time for them to actually get into the building to look, give us the services. 3, to realize our vision for the space, and 4, do we have a relationship with them? So right now we're currently, we looked across a bunch of vendors, and the one that we like to go with is Opticon for a few reasons. One is they do have the ability to get the parts within a reasonable amount of time, within 6 to 8 weeks. Other vendors wouldn't even be able to see our space for the next few weeks. So, they didn't know how long the time would be after that. And I'm just going to kind of go over what are some of the ideas that I worked with Dawn and Joe, and actually had some of the board members come in and look at the space, and what we landed on it. So I'm just going to share my screen really quick. Everyone see my screen? Thumbs up. Good. All right. So the new Board of Ed space. So here is kind of my rough guest drawing I made for the vendors when we were going to talk to them about the space. It's a top-down view, and it's pretty much set up how the original Board of Ed room was set up. So we have the audience in the rear, and everyone is facing, those arrows are for where people will be sitting. We have the board members around kind of that U shape. We wanted to keep that. I had board members come in, we talked, and we said, let's preserve that. It was well liked. And then of course that table where community members can speak, people addressing the board can speak. But a few things that we wanted to do different is, instead of a projector, we are going with 4 large televisions. Now, the reason why is this room gets a lot of sunlight because of the big windows on one side. So these TVs look great in direct sunlight, the TVs that we're planning on getting. We want to have different areas of visibility for people with disabilities. And at the very bottom, it's going to lead into the modularity of the room. This will also be a great way for board members. They don't have to, if they're sitting up like where, let's say, Jonathan would be, he doesn't have to turn his head around and everything. And all the members up front with Susie, they can just look off to the side to see the TV. The other reason why we don't want to go with projector, other than the noise and constantly buying bulbs, is projectors notoriously have a delay. And now that we're in a world where we might be having a guest in virtually to a live board meeting, that delay brings up a whole lot of feedback issues. And I'll get to that in a moment. The system has a multi-camera system set up. These are the slides I took out, but there'll be cameras, and I put them at human level. So the cameras won't be in the ceiling looking down at the tops of everyone's heads. It'll point at the person talking when they're talking. It'll be very important. And then this leads us to the audio setup. So all microphones and media systems in this setup, we would like to go completely wireless. And this is an example of one of the units that we're looking at. These units can last 24 hours on a single charge. They come with replaceable batteries. So if one dies, we can just swap it out very quickly. The amazing thing about these is they are built for hybrid environments where the feedback can be canceled out immediately. And that was an issue we've had a lot, is if I have people in the room and there's a guest coming in virtually, or a board member needs to be on virtually, this way they can we can hear everyone very clearly, and there won't be any feedback for those listening at home or people using the ADA devices. This whole setup will be fully ADA compliant, which means if someone comes in to see it in person, we'll either have headsets to give them, or there'll be a login Bluetooth that they can use on their phone, and then they can use any medical device they need to listen. All devices on this will be wireless. So if a guest brings in their laptop, it's a wireless dongle that can plug into it, and they can just present on the screens. We can control how many things are on the screens and display it at any given time. This here is now it's very bare. We're still moving in, so it's going to look much nicer. We're going to have some nice wall art and some nice things, but I did a little kind of a rough simulation. So this is where the TVs would be. If I look in the rear of the room, again, please excuse its messiness. We're still moving stuff in there. We're going to have TV in the rear, a TV on the side. This way, even if I'm in the boardroom and I can look at the back, I can still see what the slides are. And that's where John Mansfield or me or anyone else will be in that corner. We're going to put a nice little box station facing the Board of Ed members as like a little command center. And it'll be like a nice looking box. We'll make sure it fits in there. If I'm sitting in the back, It's going to look like this for our guests. We're going to have 2 speakers that are pointed at them. And it's a speaker system that can do spatial sound that'll help focus on those who are talking, and also can produce like the kind of the negative interference you want to drown out other background noises for people listening at home and for people listening with ADA devices. So there's a lot going on here for this area. And what let me just shut that off for a moment. Okay, we're back. There we go. And what this really kind of leads us to is the idea of not only this space being used for Board of Ed, but it's a modular space. We'd like to use this for educational functions, professional development, ways for district leadership to broadcast to the community and within the community. It has a lot of uses. This right now, the quote we're looking at, or the pricing range for this room, kind of soup to nuts getting done, is going to be around $100K. And the main reason for that price is because we're going fully wireless. We want the modularity in the room. We want the ease of use for ADA compliance. And we also want to be able to connect with all of our mobile services, Zoom, Google Meets. Down the road, if we have someone that only uses Skype, we could have them on our Zoom. We could do all sorts of these modular things pretty easily with this setup. Any questions? Yes, Margaret.
Margaret, you want to start us off?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, thank you for that. And it sounds exciting. I'm sorry I won't be a part of a meeting that's in that new space because it looks nice.
We'd have to invite you over.
Policy wonk over here. I just want to make sure that as you are talking about the budget for this, that you remember policy 3320 regarding competitive bids and stuff. So
That's actually why we're here, Margaret. Yeah. So, Dawn, do you want to speak to that? And we appreciate you being so good with those policies.
Absolutely.
Dawn, sure. Our policy indicates that any $50,000 or more should be a competitive bid, but our regulations also allow for us to have waivers for certain circumstances. In this particular case, we find that waiver number 1 and waiver number 2 kind of fit the process. Waiver number 2 says time is a critical factor, and taking the time necessary to comply with the formal process would not be in the best interest of the school district. We want to get the boardroom up and running as fast as we can. The other would be waiver number 1, which is a reasonable or qualified source can be identified. This shall include situations such as the purchase of copyright materials or textbooks. While this is not copyright material or textbooks, Dr. DeSantis had mentioned that he found a vendor who has a product and can get this done in a timely fashion that we have available.
Is this a capital project or operating?
Capital.
We do have capital money
Yes.
that for technology infrastructure that we had already anticipated possibly needing for the new space. And this is one of those areas that we would be able to use a little bit of capital money on.
Other questions from the board? Is this an action item? Are you looking for a vote or a nod?
I actually don't think we actually need a vote, Jonathan. What we really intended on doing tonight was to ensure that we were as transparent as possible.
Absolutely.
In particular with this process, because it's just important for everyone, the community and the Board of Education, to know that when we don't go out to bid, why we don't go out to bid. So that's really the intention. I don't think that this requires a vote.
I believe it. To my ear, it sounds like it fits the waivers. If any other board member feels otherwise, this would be a good time to say so. All right.
All right. Thank you very
for that
much.
update.
I'll keep you guys updated as we know more and when we move forward.
This will be ready for us on the 22nd? Of some other month. Okay.
We'll see what month. Yeah.
All right.
Budget meeting in January. That's what we're shooting for.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay, next up, we have action item F, approval of collective bargaining agreement with the NEA of Ridgefield. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Ridgefield Board of Education and NEA Ridgefield presented this evening, November 8th, 2021.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Ken seconds. Any questions, or can we go to a vote? All those in favor of approving, please raise your hands.
Jonathan, I'm saying aye. This is Liz Fogel. I'm just having some technical challenges.
Got it, Liz. I see your background, but not you. You say aye. That is unanimous, 7-0. Thank you. Motion passes. Next up, second read of policies, starting with policy 1212, school volunteers. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 1212, school volunteers.
Do I have a second? Kathleen? Margaret, anything change here? We good to go?
I didn't, no changes from the last board meeting, just an explanation actually on this as well as 1250. I know in the last meeting, some board members asked why they hadn't seen a redlined version of it. And I think Ken rightly responded that there were pretty much wholesale changes to both of those policies, as you can see if you look at the attached redline version. So that was why we didn't, because it was almost just almost a pure substitution. But because it was asked in the last meeting, we did show the old policy basically all being scratched out and the new one that's been substituted.
Thank you. You're only on the board for a few more minutes, so I'm going to ask you questions on each of these policies.
Make sure.
Any board questions on 1212? There being none, all those in favor of approving policy 1212, school volunteers, please raise your hands or say aye.
Aye.
7-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to G number 2, policy 1250, visits to schools. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 1250, visits to schools.
Do I have a second? Kathleen, thank you. Margaret, where are we on this one?
This one, we did actually added that the red line language here is the addition that Rachel mentioned in the last meeting. So we put that in for this version.
We're comfortable with that change? Any questions, concerns? All those in favor of approving policy 1250, please raise your hands or say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, 7-0. Thank you. And last policy for the night.
I move that the Board of Education approve policy 4122, classroom observers.
Thank you, Rachel. Do I have a second? Thank you, Margaret. Anything new on this one, Margaret?
Really big changes. We added the word program.
I see that in bright red. Thank you. Any questions here? Anything you want to drag out for Margaret on this last night of policy? Anyone?
Anyone?
All those in favor of approving policy 4122, classroom observers, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
7. Thank you. Unanimous. And that closes discussion items for tonight. We can move on to correspondence to the board, starting with public comment.
Currently, I see no attendees. John, is that correct?
That's what I see as well. I had a guy come in and out a couple times, but he is not there currently.
No one signed up?
We did have one, and he was here earlier, but he has since left.
Okay. Okay. Correspondence report.
So we have received 2 emails since our last Board of Education meeting. One email regarded bus schedules and one email regarding a webinar. And that's it.
Thank you, Rachel. And we have come to the word adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Ken so moves. Do I have a second? Sean is a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hands. Or say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That's everyone. Margaret, Kathleen, thank you so much for everything.
Before I go, I just want to say the same to everyone else. It's been such a pleasure to serve with all of you and to serve all these children in our community. So I just
You
want
guys
to
can
say
run again in 2 years.
thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Everyone.
Everyone stay safe.